President Bola Ahmed Tinubu just of recent announced that the CID and the investigative units that were in charge of NSAS, End Bad Governance protesters investigation should also be investigated because of the state that they were in court. These people were looking so frail, they were looking so slim, so thin. You would know that they have not been properly taken care of. And these are protesters who had spent 68 to 70 days, in detention. And now we are seeing that the protesters are now confessing that they survived majorly on beans and garri for 68 days. And I'm like, no wonder those children were looking that way. No wonder. Before we delve right into the details of today's news, if this is your first time here or you have not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe, like this video, also leave your opinions in the comment section below. Discharged protesters released to the Kaduna State Governor, Malam Uba Sani, have narrated how they survived on beans and garri during their 68-day stay at the Kuje prison in Abuja. Recall that no fewer than 114 suspects arrested during the August End Bad Governance protest were on Tuesday released to the governors of Kano and Kaduna states by the federal government. The detainees were released to the governors at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, following their discharge by a federal high court in the Federal Capital Territory, FCT. The federal government had dropped the treason charges against the defendants after the uproar that greeted their arraignment, especially minors among them. Speaking to our correspondent after they were reunited with their families on Wednesday, Azan Muhammad, a resident of Ghana Road in Malali, Kaduna North local government area of the state, said the experience was very bad. He said, I was arrested on 5th August 2024 at Amadu Bello Way in Kaduna during the End Bad Governance protest. After our arrest, we were taken to the State Criminal Investigation Department, CID, where we gave our statement, and from there, we were moved to the Federal Criminal Investigation Department, FCID. We spent 18 days at the FCID. After that, we were taken to Kuje prison. We spent 68 days in the prison. It was a bad experience and the feeding was also bad. They were giving us beans and garri for the days we spent in the prison. Also speaking, Mohammed Abubakar from Zaria said he had learnt a valuable lesson with this arrest and detention, adding that the experience would be with him for a while. The Commissioner Ministry of Human Services and Social Development, Ajiya Rabi Salisu, urged the discharged protesters to go back to their communities and engage in advocacy and sensitization and peace building so that they could be better members of the society. She said the detainees, comprising 39 adults and 2 children, would be supported with empowerment and psychosocial services. One thing I want to draw our attention to here is that not just were these protesters being served beans and garri for the duration of the 68 days, that they were in prison, but also let's look at this in a broader view. Let's not just limit this to the protesters. There were other prisoners at Kuje Correctional Center where these protesters were kept. There are other prisoners there, which means that the other prisoners, including the other prisoners, were also given beans and garri every single day. Beans and garri, beans and garri. You see, the federal government shouldn't just, look at, those who investigated the minors. They shouldn't just look at the CID or the investigative units who were in charge with investigating the protesters. They should also look at, the correctional facilities as well. How are the prison taken care of? I know that this is not a very interesting topic for a lot of people because, people are not concerned about criminals, about the welfare of criminals, because at the end of the day, these people are criminals. But I think that, their welfare should be looked at. It should be looked at. Because you're a prisoner doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taken care of. Take, for example, the Binance executive that was arrested here in Nigeria and detained. Look at the way he was looking so frail. In fact, the United States asked that, he should be taken to the hospital, he should be taken care of. They even needed access to him, but the federal government denied all of that. And which is against, if it's even against the criminals' human rights. Criminals also have human rights. They should be treated properly. They should be given food for the duration of the time that they are there. It's not that you are giving them beans and garri, beans and garri. And now the federal government is saying that they want to investigate, the CID and the investigative unit in charge of this case, forgetting that who are the ones funding these correctional centers? Who are the ones responsible for the funding? Is it that the funding is there? The funding is provided by the federal government, but there are some people who are embezzling the money and not allowing the money, get to the prisoners. Or is it that the government is not even providing enough funds, to be used to run the correctional center, that they could only afford beans and garri to their prisoners? Those are the things we should look at. Those are the things, that Nigerians should talk about, should voice their opinions on. It doesn't just end at, end bad governance protesters. It doesn't just end there. Because they are released, it doesn't mean that all of these issues has ended. No, there are still more pressing issues on ground, because these protesters were arrested and were detained at Kuje prison. If these protesters are saying that they were giving beans and garri for the duration of 68 years, imagine what the other prisoners who have been there for years have had to go through. You can imagine what they have had to go through in prison, just surviving basically on beans and garri every single day. Before we go, let's just take a look at just a few reactions from people online. Abdullahi Abubakar says they only show us the minor in a police custody for 93 days while the adults were taken to Kuje prison. It was because the alarm of a minor blew before these adult groups were released. Kaima says, Kai area, why are you doing this to your own people? They deserve a better life. Another thing, they are mature to the ones I saw in the courtroom. You all, let us have your opinions in the comment section. Thank you very much for always listening and watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye for now.